What kind of intro do you want to do?
I don't know, I was just thinking like, hey everybody, I'm Brokebutt. Or you could say, I'm Gabby and this is Brokebutt. And
I mean, once upon a time, I did try and do proper intros, but that day is long past me. Well, I guess I do actually have to work on another one for something else, but for this, I mean, this is properly branded as the world's worst podcast. It would almost seem a shame to not do a cold open.
I mean, if you're following suit with your other world's worst.
Which I just might be.
Literally, two friends just talking and communicating, and here we are.
Indeed, here we are. Here to explain what we're doing.
You idiot. I knew you were recording. Hey everybody. This is the world's worst movie review segment starring Brokebutt and Gavisas.
Wow. Such high energy.
Did I butcher? I am very high energy. So I am the high energy of the things, and Gavi is the one who judges me for the high energy.
I am the cold analytical fun sucker.
Mm-hmm.
Have been since 2012.
Yeah. I've only known you for a couple of months, but I could definitely see it.
Oh yes, I have not changed. If anything, I've gotten worse.
So with that said, I will do the introduction of what movie we're watching tonight. This is a movie starring Anne Hathaway called One Day. I have seen it once a couple of years ago. Gavi has never seen it, and we will be watching the movie and then immediately starting to record for our listeners. Whatever. For our listeners to hear us ramble on about, just like I'm rambling on about this now. So, with that said, let's start the movie and we will talk to you guys shortly.
And remember, we'll be back in 3, 2, 1. And we're back after having now watched this movie here. Okay. Brooke, but would you like to lead off here?
I was actually going to say, since I've already seen it, and although it has been a while and I forgot a lot of it, I remembered the most important parts. So I'm going to let you take the lead on this one.
Well, it's a little hard to follow right off the bat because there's a lot of jumping around. It's less of a cohesive story and more of miniature vignettes that are stitched together. And then the ending gets really confusing because you're like, was it a dream? Then it wasn't. And then you're like, oh, so I still have to be sad some more. Okay. I guess that's how this one's going. Fair?
Fair, very fair. I mean, I agree 100%. And the way that they piece together the different days and the timeline was beautiful because they added the different little things. Like the first year, she had fairly short hair. And then the second year that it showed, she had longer hair.
Mm-hmm.
So, overall, what is your opinion of the movie?
I mean, you're looking for a score here, or?
I mean, just like your general, I don't know.
I mean, I think it's very well done. I think it's very well acted. I was having a little bit of difficulty with Anne Hathaway's British accent, and then I realized what the problem was, and it made it really funny to me for some reason. Well, I know exactly the reason. She can't roll her R's.
See, even famous actresses have issues with that, Gabby.
I
It's
know.
not just
I
me.
know, but I just found it hilarious because like there's a bunch of R's that like she should have been rolling that she was not, and I'm like, oh, I see what's going on here, and I found that it tickled me quite a bit. Um, yeah, that was very funny. Um, for those of you who are not aware, broke but can't roll her R's either.
I try. It's terrible.
It is. But you can definitely tell that she had a professional accent coach, not an amateur person who's like, no, do it this way, but like a professional person who's like, okay, so since you can't do it that way, try it this way instead, because after a while that kind of disappeared. Um, Interesting that you mentioned her hair. That I think is a sign of not just good movie planning, but it tells you a lot about the order of events in which this movie was filmed. Because they would have filmed the scenes with the longer hair first and then
Mhm.
cut it back shortly. So, like, the last scenes that would have been filmed were actually the ones in Paris, which is particularly interesting to me. Just how they would have played that out.
At where that's at in the story.
Uh huh. Yeah,
Yeah.
so like they would have known already where they were going before they got there, and then have to kind of dial it back. Um, Interesting. Although that is very much the emotional high point of the film, so I suppose it does make sense, even from an acting standpoint, for that to be the last thing that they would have filmed because that would have been allowed the actors to really escalate to that point, as opposed to being like, okay, well, we need you to start at 11 and then go back down to a 7, kind of thing. Um,
It definitely shows an artistic standpoint from the writers and directors of it because they had to, I mean, and the actors too, because they weren't completing the story in sequence. So they were having to act that scene in the story and jump back and forth, like emotionally or with their character, however.
Right, and I think that that lent itself a lot to the idea of these being more vignettes as opposed to being cohesive story. Um, I mean, it's all the same two people, and it's all the same progression of events over a 20-year period. Um, I didn't think she was going to die. I didn't think that was going to, like. I saw her like getting hit. I'm like, okay, it's gonna be the classic thing where she's gonna be in the hospital and they have to work through it. And 3 years later, she's gonna be well enough, and then they're gonna have a baby, and they're gonna have all this. And then it's like, oh no, she's just dead. Oh, okay. Spoiler alert, by the way. It's an it's a 9-year-old movie. Catch up with life.
I mean, you hadn't seen it yet, so you know.
True. I mean, there's a lot of movies I haven't seen. People are always surprised when I say I haven't seen a film. Um,
Considering this is a romance, like based off of a romance novel, that doesn't surprise me so much with this one.
we will have to watch The
But
Holiday, and you'll see that doesn't really make that much of a difference because The Holiday is one of my favorite movies, but that's a whole other story. Okay, it's like
understandable.
it's like in the top 50 somewhere in there, but that's a whole other story.
Whole nother movie night.
Whole nother movie night. Yes.
Okay, I really appreciate, I mean, back to the hair, it's the nitty gritty details because if you pay attention to it, it actually shows a lot about the character development.
Explain.
Okay, so her hair at the beginning, she's this fun loving college kid. Everything's positive. I'm just happy to be alive.
No, I don't think she ever was really just happy to be anything throughout the course of this film. She seemed kind of world weary from the first couple of scenes there. Um, and it's actually kind of funny that that's the case because then her hair gets even longer when she goes to work at the Mexican restaurant, which means that that was probably the first sequence filmed. Um, which is kind of interesting.
Goes back to, what is it? Princess Diaries hair?
Yeah, pretty
The
close to it.
frizzy. Um, so my point with it in the first part of the movie, she's a young college kid. Maybe not everything's happy about life,
hmm
but she was more sporadic and just, carefree than she was at other points in the movie.
her arc starts at like neutral, and then it goes down, and then she rebounds upward. If you watch the arc of Dexter, it's like it starts high. He is the king of his castle, the ruler of his world. Everything is just panning out beautifully for him, and then he takes the biggest nosedive of all, and then he bumps back up to extreme high, and then he bottoms out again, and then levels off. Um,
Ends up at neutral.
he ends
So
up,
kind of the opposite of hers.
yeah. I mean, totally. I mean, she. There are some points where I don't know if what they were trying to communicate was properly communicated. Like they get married, fantastic. It only took them 15 years to do it, 16 years to do it, right? And so they get married 16 years after the fact, and then it's like, well, where do we go from here? And then they show us a year later, and she is still not, I mean, so it took them a year to say that she wants to get pregnant. Then another year after that, she is still not pregnant, and that's like the last day that she's around. So it's weird to kind of, I mean, it's a very human story where it's not a unbroken line up or unbroken line down like you'll typically see in a lot of other stories. Usually in most films and stuff, you'll see like the hero, the main protagonist, has this constant trajectory up. There'll be little dips and stuff on that, but like it will constantly trend upward, and they won't really bottom out on anything. This one had a very lifelike trajectory where it's like things go up and things come down and things go up and things come down. And I am kind of concerned about what happened to the jazz musician, but
The jazz musician, yeah, just
like, oh, I'm going to meet with my beautiful girlfriend and her friend from years ago, and she's suddenly telling me that she's just gonna leave, and I'm not meeting the friend, and she's gonna, oh, I guess there's a thing now. Okay, I guess I was just a space filler. I bet you he transitioned from the jazz to the blues. So
okay, we're
the,
not trying to be the comedian in the movie.
the
Okay.
French blues. It's worse.
Oh my tros. Uh, go fall down the stairs. That might be funnier.
I do my best.
I do feel really bad for his character though. I can't remember his name.
Ian.
The curly head, yeah, Ian.
Mm-hmm.
Because she went from like their first date was just a classic, this is terrible. We both know this is terrible. Just whatever. To okay, we're semi enjoying each other's company. But she was never there.
So
with their relationship.
This is kind of an issue that I see with some people. There's folks who give what are called pity dates, where they'll be like, okay, well, this person, they're just, they're lonely, they're by themselves, and then they just like, okay, well, I'll date them one time. With no intention, and like expressly having zero intention of ever turning it into something serious, but they're trying to be nice. And actually, I find that to be worse than if you just let them be miserable by themselves, because then they go, oh, someone has the potential of attaching themselves to me, and then it creates kind of this weird like reverse tension where where one is trying to pull away and the other one's trying to push themselves closer to them. And that's very much the dynamic that was expressed between Ian and Emma there, where he was actively pursuing her. And I mean, the big confrontation that they had, where he's like, I discovered that you have been in love with your best friend for all these years. And, and he discovers that he was never going to be able to fulfill that role. Which I think is kind of disingenuous, really, on her part. I mean, Dexter clearly has a bevy of character flaws, but it really seemed at that point in particular where Emma was just like trying to use Ian as a means to deflect her own. I mean, he was conveniently there to deflect her from her own desires for somebody else. And so she was just like ingratiating herself with him, and then she realized that she realized from the start, but then she double realized just how much she despised him. Um, so the whole pity date thing doesn't work out, first of all. But I mean, not to get preachy about this, but if there's someone that you're interested in, or even more so, if there's someone who you're not interested in, be very forthcoming with that information. Be very forthcoming with that information because, um, yeah.
It gets you into some pretty sticky situations. I feel like I'm pretty good about being straightforward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I mean, and to say, so this is actually pulling from, uh, a different program altogether, and one which I only watched I think 2 seasons of. But there's a show called Once Upon a Time, and I lost interest fairly quickly. But there's one point in like somewhere in the first 2 seasons before I lost interest, where the the evil queen or whatever, had an opportunity for true love and she misses it, and then she meets the blue fairy, and the blue fairy says, oh well, you can still have a chance at love, and she opens up the door for a new opportunity to engage in true love. But the evil queen decides, instead of pursuing that, to instead pursue revenge, which makes her the evil queen. Before that, she was just the princess of yada yada no name country. Doesn't matter, because after that she became the evil queen. Backstory doesn't matter nearly as much when you have a defining trait which overrides that. But one of the things that happens later on from that story is that she re-encounters the blue fairy, and blue fairy's like, well, why didn't you go to him? She's like, well, I decided this was more important. And the blue fairy accuses her point blank of being the most selfish person she's ever met, because not only did she deprive herself of happiness, but she also deprived that other person who would have been the true love, as it were. And I really like that idea that, not I mean, and this is more the negative aspect of that if you have someone who could be your true love, and you know for a fact that the person that you're spending a lot of time with is not that, this could get really complicated really quickly here. If you if you know that, you kind of have to start questioning whether or not that's the best thing. But I mean, particularly if you may in fact be avoiding something that is much more real, or has a much more lasting impact for that life. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that comes back to if Anne Hathaway's character, if M had been very straightforward with him, it would have saved them both a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
But another completely like jumping with topic of conversation now, but I found it really interesting when Dex was sitting there with his little girl, and it was when he was still married the first time, and he saw his ex on TV hosting, doing what he used to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that as excuse me, I saw that as a huge character development moment, and really showed how far he had come, because he was just, I feel like his character was just very, I used to do that. What?
Right.
Second guessed that entire chapter of his life. Just what was I thinking?
Of course, this is one of those movies where if you really think about it, there aren't that many likable characters. There's like his dad. His dad is almost universally likable because he's just a good person. His mother is also likable.
She doesn't have as
much to do.
Her role. I mean, although it builds his character a lot,
mm-hmm.
It doesn't near as much as his dad does, and just where he's like, what do you think I've been doing for the last 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
And he just has that really aha moment.
And even before that, his dad really served as a conscience to him, because even in points where his mother was very sick and she could have been the one to kind of throw a guiding word at him. His dad was the one who really stepped up at that point, like took his keys, took his car, and said, "You need to help. You need to get help. And if you don't get help, I'm going to put a buffer between you and your mother because you're killing her, essentially." And his
I
dad.
am
Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead.
I am kind of curious about the part where his mom said, let's get a nice table at a restaurant and go sit down and talk. I'm just kind of curious as to what that conversation was about, because if my first thought was, oh, is this when she's going to tell him? Is that when she told him, I have cancer? But I mean, I don't know if the writers intentionally left that as a question mark or if that was like a deleted scene. But
Well, I think that that is a. I believe that that is what she told him at that thing at that time where they have the the white tablecloth conversation. But I don't think that it's so much a deleted scene as it is a conversation which was left out intentionally because it fell outside of the parameters of the movie. The parameters of the movie all takes place on the same day of every year, and that would have been, and from the mother's own words, that would have been the next day. So it fell outside of the parameters of the film. They had to just leave it out, because the next time that we see her, she has cancer, and like really has cancer, um, to the point where she needs to be carried to bed, kind of thing.
I am curious about the shoes. Unless they did that to tie it in later to signify like the point that he had traveled to, like when they went from the fountain and his dad pulled out the shoes for her. Or maybe that was a sign, hey, you're wearing heels. Those can't be comfortable. You already have enough problems. Take these flats.
I think that the shoes, if you're going to attach symbolism to them, could very well, because apparently, I mean, they were important enough that they took time to film it twice.
That's what
Um,
yeah.
so if I was to attach symbolism to it, I think it's really talking about the mentality behind the two of them. Um, because even his mother's um wording at that when the dad brings them out, she's like, you care so much, you're always thinking about me, kind of thing, and that it is a sign of um not sacrificial love, but just always keeping the other person in mind and then doing what you can to better their life, even in some small way like that. Whereas that is kind of Dexter's first opportunity to experience the same thing, but he finds it at a point where he has a rapidly decreasing opportunity to really experience that. Because when he encounters that for himself, it is when she is on death's door and she cannot take them off herself. Which, I mean, they're British. They're not going to keep their shoes on in bed. And so that's his means of serving her to some extent. And it's really the first chance we see in the film where he does something very selfless, um, even in his inebriated state. And so he doesn't really have a time to really process that, and then he immediately starts fighting with his father, and so there's a separation there, and everyone's unhappy again. And so
Just a wide range and waves of emotion through
right,
the whole film.
right, but it's his first real opportunity to interact with somebody in that kind of selfless sort of way. And I think that with the shoes were a means of expressing like selfless love. Um, even, I mean, if you want to get really deep into it, I forget who it was. Oh, it was when they're at the wedding later on with whatever her name was. I don't know. They only mentioned it once. The lady who was getting married and singing very off key. And they're
Karaoke.
talking.
And her dress looked like a wedding cake, but not a good kind. Not the pretty ones, like the ones from the 70s.
Notwithstanding. Anyway, so they're having this moment here, and uh, he's talking about a time where he bedded the bride, um, and how it started out as a foot massage that went south. And it's like,
Is that the correct term?
I mean, from the north it is.
Anywho, continue.
I mean, we don't
Proceed.
intentionally use the South as a derogatory term, but it does work as a nice placeholder from time to time. So,
I was just thinking, I mean, if it was a foot massage,
like it has it was a point where it had the potential to be a selfless act, but then he twisted it to become very self-serving.
mm-hmm.
And so that it kind of, again, I mean, I don't know why this is all of a sudden about feet, but here we are. Anyway, I promise this is not a Tarantino film, but that's a very nuanced joke.
Yeah, I don't understand it.
It's because you've never seen a Tarantino film. But there definitely is a kind of a existing correlation, even to the point where she gets hit by the truck. Like, I mean, they made a point of, like, when they first show her, they start at her left foot and work their way up. Um, like the whether shoe on, shoe off kind of thing. So it's like, to that extent, it might be like she was hanging in the balance for a second between life and death, which kind of gave you the idea. I mean, because you can kind of sit her gasping for breath there. Doesn't look like she's doing very good. There's blood on the ground. There's blood on
On
her,
her foot.
on her foot. I mean, everywhere. So it's like, it doesn't look like she's in a good way, but maybe she's in that balancing point, which kind of lends the idea that, oh, okay, she's going to, pull through. And then it shows the next scene, 2 years later, and he's drunking at a rave party, and you're like, that just low life. He abandoned
Actually,
her. Like, when I first saw that, I'm like, I can't believe that this guy would abandon a crippled woman that he supposedly loved. And I'm like getting upset at him, and then I'm like, oh, she's dead. Okay, gotcha. Now it makes
you
sense.
didn't catch that though? Because, okay, so right after the scene where she's lying on the sidewalk dead and he gets the voicemail, it cuts to him lying on the bed holding her nightgown.
I must have missed that
And he's
entirely.
just completely glazed over.
I must have missed
And then it goes to
the nightclub.
him at the rave party. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay. I am remembering this. You're correct.
I
I
mean,
I
the
didn't make that I
significance.
didn't make that connection there because I'm like, because when I first saw it, I'm like, okay, well, he's laying in bed next to her, and it's kind of a nice thing. Because I didn't really connect the nightgown as being in his hand. I just saw him in bed crying, like, okay, he's having a difficult time. He's trying to help her through this, and then my perception on this was incorrect. I thought she was still there, and then it cuts to 2 years later, and he's in a nightclub, and I'm like, you.
You dirty dog, you.
Like,
No, no, that you missed a very important
I
scene
did miss.
again with the details of the film because he's laying there and he has her nightgown,
Mm-hmm.
the silvery whatever one,
Yeah.
and it's just, I mean, because thing,
The last thing we see
so
before that is that they were trying to have a child, and that was what she was wearing. It has significance of like a lost opportunity, lost future, the thing that could have been, but now can never be.
right, and I'm just like, and just the emotion, the blankness and emotionlessness on his face in that moment, just like,
I mean,
bravo to the actor. You're frozen, so I might be talking to myself, but
she is not, in fact, talking to herself, but
the
she thinks she is.
act moment did a really fantastic job of conveying the feelings of that character because all these years, like 20 years, that have built up to finally I have what I've been looking for and chasing after all this time. When it was right in front of me, I finally have it, and now it's just gone, and I don't know what's next. Like, there's nothing next.
Right.
And then it cuts to the rave party
Yes.
where
Where I was angry. Right. I don't know if I'm unfrozen on your side yet.
You're unfrozen.
Okay, that's good.
I guess you could hear me the whole time.
The whole time.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the little girl, his daughter, has a very small role, but a very significant role.
Okay.
And I think the most defining point that her character has is when she moves his hand off of her bear or her little stuffed bunny, whatever it is, and just holds on to it. Because it's that moment of, you're not my dad anymore. I don't know you. And then it's just a beautiful moment when it comes back around and it's there. He's taking her up to the hill where him and M first, like, really had their first quote date, their first day together.
It's kind of interesting because I feel like that was a very significant moment. Yes. It's almost like from a child's perspective, there's a bit of selfishness in that where she's saying, you're holding somebody else as being more important than me. And I don't know if I'm frozen on your side or not.
You're not,
Okay.
but holding somebody else, I mean, that's not there anymore. Very significant. Somebody that's not even, quote, real. Because in a child's mind, that person's not there. They're just, why are you still thinking about it? Because kids, they do hold on to things, but in a different way than adults do.
Right.
And to her, the 15th is just another day. So
I mean, from the, what was it, like 2004 section or something? That was the day she was conceived. But
I mean, yeah, that one was kind of important for her, anyways. I mean,
yeah.
Overall, I think it's just watching it again now. That now that you have kind of taught me how to analyze and find the details in films, I just have that much more of an appreciation for it.
Well, it's a.
I mean, there.
Say it's a.
We can't have dead air. It's a podcast.
It's a podcast-ish. And anyway, no matter what it is, it's the world's worst, whatever it is.
So for listeners, if you choose to listen to all this rambling, if you hear dead air, it's probably because Gavi and I are sitting there with our hands over our mouth trying to let the other one talk.
Problem.
I really don't even know what I was gonna say, but I do have, I do appreciate the line that Anne Hathaway had when she was in the Mexican restaurant and she's talking to the customer and she's explaining all the things in a Mexican restaurant. Like, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that just so I know what I'm getting when I go to a Mexican restaurant, because I always get like grilled chicken quesadilla, nachos, or street tacos. Like, that's it.
I mean, if you want the actual line, I have it here.
Go for it.
A tortilla is either corn or wheat, but a corn tortilla folded and filled is a taco, whereas a filled wheat tortilla is a burrito. Deep fry a burrito, it's a chimichanga. Toast a tortilla, it's a tostada. Roll it, it's an enchilada.
She said it better.
I know she said it better. She had practice. That was probably take number 37 or something. I'm reading it off of IMDb. I really like from that same scene, which might actually be one of the better scenes in the film, is I also like her "Welcome to the Graveyard of Ambition." Some of the shots were really, really well done. I like when they went on vacation together. There's that shot, two shots actually, where they show both of them through the mirror. Like they take a picture, the shot is static on a mirror, and they're both sitting there, and then the second one they're lying there. But it's just a really well composed shot, and I really appreciated it. It like gives a
Mm-hmm.
frame. It gives a frame, sort of snapshot kind of thing to be like. It kind of conveys the whole idea of the movie that they're not actually going to show you the full story. They're just going to show you this little snippet, and then you can piece things together for yourself.
I
Um,
think it also shows about like their character development with one another because they didn't see what was right in front of them.
and in the first one, they're obeying all the rules, and then the second one is after they've broken all the rules.
Hmm.
Um,
I applaud whatever kid stole his clothes.
oh dear.
I just
I
think
do
that
find it
he deserves
interesting
that.
that there's two French kids. French kids? I think they're French. Might as well be French.
Sure, why not?
Darn the French. Anyway, there's two young French boys, and they steal the guys' clothes, but not the girls. They're French boys. I think that would have been a much higher priority on their list of things to do that evening, as
See,
opposed to his.
I did think that too. I was like, okay, so if you're gonna, I mean, if they were gonna steal somebody's clothes, but I think that that goes back to he had Calvin Klein underwear for
Mm-hmm.
one thing, and um, he also, I think he deserved it.
Well, I mean, he was breaking the rules, but
Yeah.
it's you cannot assign arbitrary bad things to happen because a person makes a in-world moral compromise. He was like he lived in moral compromise up until 4/5 the way through the movie, and so like yeah, okay, so he's a kind of a garbage person, and a garbage things happens to him. It's funny, haha. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I don't really think it's necessary to say that he deserved to have that happen to him. That might be a bit of a stretch.
Okay. Well, to each his own. I think. I mean,
There's a bit of uh trying to remember the like it's like a karmic sense that yes he deserved that, or I forget what the term is, but it's like dramatic irony, but that's not it. It's something else. Poetic justice, that's the one, where it's like,
mhm.
okay, he's a garbage person, garbage thing happens to him, haha, it's funny, I can enjoy this. It strokes the schadenfreude in me and makes it happy. But I mean, at the same, and plus he was also being like an extra jerk at that point, where he's like, yes, I like you, after she like bears her soul, and he just, I don't think he was wittingly, or at least the character wasn't wittingly making fun of her, but the words that he said were cutting very, very deep. I love
Mhm.
everybody, and I slept with this girl and that girl, and if you just want to have a fun little fling with me, that's fine. When
And
she's
she
like, I'm talking babies and monogamy until death do us
life.
part, and you're like, would you like to have a summer fling? And that was clearly not the right thing to say. So there, at that moment, there's also a little bit of extra poetic justice, but I mean,
You
yeah,
know that she definitely wanted to hold him under longer than she did, but
yes, yes, um, very much so. And we probably would have totally endorsed the practice of her doing so. Um,
then there would be no movie.
Depends on how long. I mean, if she stopped just before he died, he was just like a vegetable. I mean,
She could have the perfect little love story where he's depends on her for his every request.
there actually is a movie like that. It's called Misery. Very differently. Very different movie. James Caan plays a writer who crashes his car and is brought into a house by a woman who is a fan of his writings, and she's like starts nursing him back to health rather than taking him to the hospital like a rational human being does. But as he starts to get better, she realizes that he may leave her, and she doesn't want that to happen. And so, while before he can get better enough to fight back, she breaks his ankles. Um,
Well, that's one way to do it.
yeah, make sure he doesn't go nowhere. Oh,
Oh.
it's such a I have that visual in my head of the foot just um Yep. That's just wonderful.
Back to the feet again. So
No, that was dramatic.
and seeing her bloody foot on the concrete was not traumatic.
Not as traumatic as that. No.
Well, I guess I haven't seen that
She
scene
puts
of that movie. So.
she puts a pine 4x4 between his legs, ties his ankles to them, and then whacks the side of his foot with a sledgehammer. No, the bloody foot was not as traumatic as that. And there's this very audible crunch, and like they don't do the cutaway thing. It's on the foot through the whole smack, and it's like, oh! And then she does the other side.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Fair. Fair.
Mm-hmm.
So, to our listeners, if we have any.
Hi, Sass.
Yeah, I was about to say, he's probably the only one who's going to listen to this. Maybe some family of mine. I doubt it, but we'll see.
Hi, Ducky.
Yeah, exactly. But if you have just a heads up, I don't know what you consider PG. There were definitely a few moments that we were like, let's just take our glasses off so we can't see anything. But it was a very good film, and I appreciate it being my night to pick the movie. So if you have any suggestions of movies for us to watch, we will consider them and add them to the list that we have been accumulating. And we can review those.
Mm-hmm. So yes, I guess this is nothing more to add in there, Broke Butt. No deep philosophical exhortations for our viewership.
Not that I can think of for this one. Why do I have a tendency to bring those out?
No, that's usually my thing. I was just checking to see if you wanted to try it out.
Well, my whole deep philosophical thing was the whole character development and being able to watch that of mostly Dex's character, but and Hathaway's character had a lot of character development too.
Mm-hmm.
I got most of my deep philosophicalness out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I didn't mean to cut it off like that, but I guess that's a good closing. So
I mean, you can't. It was definitely trending that way. So, yeah. So thank you, Sass, and anyone else who is glutton for punishment for tuning in. Wow, this is the first movie review I've done that wasn't actually longer than the movie. I can't believe it. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. We will likely have more of these coming in the future. Hopefully you find this enjoyable. And yeah, we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.
bye.